The signal you missed. How your cerebellum knows you're burning out before you do. She sat in the conference room, staring at her notes, but the words didn't make sense anymore. Her hand shook slightly as she reached for her coffee. Third cup that morning, and she wondered when exactly she'd stopped feeling like herself. Most of us think burnout announces itself with exhaustion or a breakdown. But what if your brain had been sending warnings for weeks? Quiet signals you mistook for stress, for getting older, for just needing more sleep. Deep inside your skull, beneath the noise of your thoughts and to-do lists, there's a structure the size of your fist that's been tracking every stumble, every delayed reaction, every moment your body moved just a fraction slower than your intention. The cerebellum, and it knows something's wrong long before you're willing to admit it. For months, she'd been fine, productive, even she handled the deadlines, managed the team, kept everything moving. But lately, small things felt off. She'd reach for her phone and knock over her water glass, walk into a room and forget why. Her timing in conversations felt delayed, like she was watching herself from behind glass. I'm just tired, she told herself. Everyone feels like this. But researchers at Johns Hopkins discovered something unsettling. The cerebellum doesn't just coordinate movement, it predicts what comes next. It creates internal models of your world, your rhythm, your capacity. And when those predictions start failing consistently, it's not random clumsiness. It's your nervous system telling you it can no longer compensate. What surprised scientists most wasn't that burnout affects the brain. That part made sense. What shocked them was where the breakdown begins. Not in the prefrontal cortex, where we make decisions. Not in the hippocampus, where we store memories. But in the cerebellum, the ancient, silent partner that runs in the background of every single thing you do. When you're chronically stressed, cortisol floods your system. Day after day, week after week. It starts degrading the connections between your cerebellar neurons. The predictive loops begin misfiring. Your brain still tries to anticipate how hard to grip that cup, when to start speaking in a conversation, how much energy you'll need to get through the afternoon, but the calculations are off, and you feel it as clumsiness, as brain fog, as a strange, creeping sense that your body isn't quite yours anymore. She started noticing it during her morning runs, a routine she'd done for years. Her foot would catch on nothing. Her balance felt unstable on flat ground. One morning, she tripped on the sidewalk and barely caught herself, heart pounding, not from exertion but from the shock of how close she'd come to falling. "What's happening to me?" she whispered, hands on her knees, breathing hard. Part of her still thought it was nothing. Fatigue, dehydration. Maybe she needed new shoes. But deep down, she knew something fundamental had shifted. Here's what most people don't realize. The cerebellum isn't just a movement machine. It's a pattern detector. It learns the rhythm of your life when you wake up, how you navigate stress, what your baseline energy feels like, and it constantly adjusts, trying to keep you functional even as your resources deplete. A study published in Nature Neuroscience found that people experiencing chronic stress show measurable changes in cerebellar activity before they report feeling burned out. The brain knew the predictions were failing, but consciously, they still felt fine. Until one day, they didn't. The cerebellum's job is to make life automatic, so you don't have to think about every step, every gesture, every word. But when it's compromised, suddenly everything requires effort. You're constantly catching up to yourself, reacting instead of flowing. And that's exhausting in a way that sleep can't fix. She started paying attention to the small things. How long it took her to find words, the way her hand hesitated before picking up objects, like her brain needed an extra beat to calculate distance. The mornings when standing up from her chair felt like navigating a boat in rough water. None of it was dramatic, but all of it was constant. Maybe I'm just getting older, she thought, but she was only 34. What happened next changed everything. A friend suggested she see a neurologist, not because anything seemed seriously wrong, but because the symptoms were persistent. The doctor listened, ran some tests, and then said something that made her chest tighten. Your cerebellum is functioning, but it's working harder than it should. Like a computer running too many programs at once. Nothing's broken yet, but you're operating at the edge of your capacity. So, what do I do? She asked. The doctor paused. You stop. Not forever, but genuinely stop, because your nervous system is trying to protect you, and you're overriding every signal it sends. Researchers at Stanford found something similar. The cerebellar loops that predict and coordinate our actions depend on rest to recalibrate. Not just sleep, though that matters, but true recovery. Time when your nervous system isn't defending against threat, real or perceived. When you're chronically activated, your cerebellum never gets to reset. It keeps trying to predict a stable world while operating in chaos, and eventually, the predictions fail. You trip, you drop things, you feel disconnected from your body. Not because you're weak, because your brain is trying to save you. She took 2 weeks off. Not a vacation with plans and itineraries, just space. She slept, she walked without a destination. She let herself be bored. At first it felt unbearable. Her mind raced with everything she should be doing. But slowly, something softened. Her balance improved. Words came easier. The tremor in her hands faded. One morning, she tied her shoes without thinking about it and realized that was the first time in months. Here's what surprised her most. The recovery wasn't linear. Some days, she felt clear. Other days, the fog returned. But she learned to recognize it now, not as failure, but as information. Her cerebellum was still recalibrating, still learning that the world wasn't a constant emergency, and she started trusting it again. The science is clear. Burnout isn't just psychological, it's neurological. And the earliest warning signs show up in the places we least expect in our movement, our timing, our ability to flow through the world without conscious effort. The cerebellum doesn't lie, it doesn't exaggerate, it just reports. This pace is unsustainable. Adjust, or I will adjust for you. And when it does, you'll feel it as clumsiness, fog, disconnection, the body's last attempt to make you listen before something more serious breaks. She laughed one afternoon, realizing how long she'd ignored the signs, how she'd pushed through every signal, thinking resilience meant endurance. But resilience isn't ignoring your nervous system. It's listening before the whispers become screams. Disclaimer: this content is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider regarding any mental or physical health concerns. What surprised me most wasn't just how a simple, wearable health tracker improved my awareness of nervous system fatigue, but how everything started to feel different once I could actually see my recovery metrics. I wasn't expecting such a clear connection between my heart rate variability and those mornings when I felt off balance or foggy. Honestly, I tested it more than a few times before I figured out what my body was actually trying to tell me. This isn't a promotion, just sharing real data that made a noticeable difference for me in recognizing early burnout signals. I'll leave a link below if you want to explore what I mean. When she looked in the mirror again, it wasn't her reflection that had changed, it was what she believed about her limits. She'd always thought pushing harder was the answer. That rest was something you earned after the work was done, but now she understood. Rest isn't the reward. It's the foundation, and your cerebellum has been trying to tell you that all along. Somewhere between the stumbles and the quiet mornings, she found rhythm again, not the frantic pace she'd mistaken for productivity, but something steadier, something sustainable. And for the first time in months, her body felt like home. Tell us what part of this story resonated most and where you're watching from. See you in the next video. Bye.